Hello, and thank you for joining me today for this very special Hangout on Air for companies that use Sage 50 accounting software. Coming up today, should you have more or less accounts payable process? My name is Hugh Johnson. I'm Head of Business Development at Suntico. And if you'd like to get in touch with me after this Hangout on Air, please do so via the normal social channels or by email at hugh.johnson@suntico.com. On the agenda today, we've got 5 topics: the who, what, when, where, and why of accounts payable processing for small businesses that use Sage 50. First of all, why have an AP process? What is considered to be good practice? And when could good practice be bad? Who should consider Suntico? And where can you evaluate Suntico for your accounts payable process? So first of all, why have an AP process in the first place? Why not just pay your vendor invoices when they come in? And the answer to that is probably very obvious to anybody in the finance function, perhaps a little bit less obvious to other people. But the answer is very simple, and that's that even small errors can actually cause big problems, particularly in a small business when it comes to accounts payable. And what I've got here is a sailing analogy where small errors can actually give you a big soaking. And the same is true for your business, because from small errors in your accounts payable process, it can open up all kinds of problems: fraud, overpayment, double payment. Perhaps if you're not paying off the invoice, if you're paying off a statement and somebody else in the company has previously paid the invoice. If you're late in paying because you're too busy trying to figure out what the invoice is internally, you can incur late payment fees, which can also damage your reputation as a business. And of course, if you're busy chasing around internally in your own business trying to figure out who ordered these items and did you receive them and should you pay them, there are considerable administration costs there and considerable admin costs in correcting errors that you've made in the AP process. And a subtle saying, well, it's probably not subtle for the finance people amongst us, but subtle perhaps for the rest of the business, is that if you've made errors in your AP process, in your accounts payable process, that actually introduces fundamental accounting errors into your balance sheet and your income statement, which then also need fixing, which can be embarrassing for the business and also costly. So these are all good reasons why you should actually consider putting in place a proper process around your accounts payable. And really all we're talking about is making sure that you order what you want for the business, you receive what you've ordered, and you pay for what you've have received. Nothing more and nothing less than that. So what is considered industry good practice is what's called a three-way match. And it's actually a very simple process. And the idea is that there are 3 important documents in your purchasing process, and those important documents would be your purchase order, the receiving report, or the goods received note, as it might be called in some organizations, and the vendor invoice. And wherever possible, particularly if you're wanting to avoid possibilities of fraud, these 3 items should be managed by different people in the organization. So one person may raise the purchase order, another person may receive the goods from the vendor and issue the receiving report, effectively stating what goods have been received and what goods have not been received. And a third person matches the vendor invoice against the original purchase order and the receiving report. Now, that sounds very simple, and in principle, it is very simple. But in a busy, small to medium-sized business that hasn't put in place automated systems to manage this, a lot of these processes tend to be run by email and telephone. And in that kind of environment, delays can occur, and what can be considered to be good process gets bogged down in delays. So to answer the question, when is good practice bad? Well, it's when this practice is introducing delays into your AP processing, and delays themselves actually can introduce some of the problems that we spoke about earlier in terms of, perhaps late payment fees, reputational damage, and administration costs, and just trying to trace down the information and the proper information that you need in order to authorize payment and pay the vendor properly. So I suppose what I'm saying is that the basic principles of the three-way match are very good and very solid and sound, but actually implementing them in a small to medium-sized business can be difficult if you haven't got the proper systems to put in place. And putting in place kind of more formal accounts payable processing systems within a small to medium-sized business can be expensive and can be difficult as well, because you might have a scenario where you've got users that are perhaps not that used to the AP system because they're not using it that often, and that introduces difficulties in terms of executing your AP processes across the business. So this is actually where Suntico comes in, because Suntico takes a very simple approach, which is to say, well, look, if you can deliver transparency and an audit trail and visibility into your AP processes, then you can take away a lot of the difficulty and the problems without having to implement what I would call perhaps a heavier weight AP processing system. So who should perhaps consider using Suntico, which after all isn't a dedicated AP processing system? Who should consider Suntico for their AP processing system? And I would argue really any company that is using Sage 50, where the people who are receiving goods and services are in a different, particularly if they're in a different location to the people, the finance teams that are perhaps raising the orders and paying the invoices. In other words, where the communications can get difficult in terms of just reconciling who has received what. Those are exactly the kind of organizations that should use Suntico. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a very quick demonstration or glimpse into how you can use Suntico to help execute your AP processing and execute a decent three-way matching system within your business without having the overhead of putting in place a much bigger system. So let's take a quick look. Okay, I'm logged on to Suntico here as Dolores Flowers in a fictitious company called Bellwether Garden Supply. And just for those of you that haven't seen Suntico before, what Suntico is a cloud-based system that connects into your Sage 50 system, and it means that you can access your data from Sage 50 and do more with it up in the cloud, which basically means anywhere where you have mobile or web-based access, you can access your data in Sage 50. So what I've done is I've logged on here as Dolores Flowers, who is the financial controller of a company, and she has received an invoice from a vendor called the Julia Wholesale Suppliers. And what she would like to do is she would like to verify that the goods have been received against this invoice. So what Dolores is going to do is raise a task. I'll try again. I'll drill down. I've created a task called a goods receipt confirmation, and I'm going to reference in a vendor invoice. I want Derek just to confirm he's received all the goods. And I'm going to assign that to Derek, and he'll get a notification. And you can see also I can drill down. There's a hyperlink there, and Derek will get that hyperlink. You can drill down to actually see the details of the record. Now what I'm going to do is I'm also going to follow that record. This is rather like Facebook. It means if there are any updates to this task request, then from Derek, that I will see it. here I am logged in as Derek Gross. Derek is out in the field and he's logged in via an iPad. He sees a notification here that Dolores Flowers has assigned a task. Now, I can drill down as Derek, and I can drill down to my tasks, or I can just go and visit my wall because I know there would be a notification there on my wall to do it. And here I have it, new task, goods receipt confirmation, purchase invoice there. I can drill down, look at the details of the purchase invoice. In the interest of time, I'm not going to do that right now because I actually know just a few minutes ago I was just looking at that. What I can do is I can look at the invoice, I can see that that's fine. I can change the status to done, which effectively is the same as approved, and I can save that. If I want, I can add a comment to the wall of that task and just say all received, thanks. I can spell correctly. I can share that. And again, rather like Facebook, this is sharing stuff across the organization subject to security and privileges, so that there's full transparency into what's going on. And that is excellent when it comes to AP processing, because transparency is key there to security of the business. I'm going to flip back to Dolores now. And I can see this note there, and I can also see the fact that the task status from Derek has been changed to done, which means that I know that I can now pay that invoice. And it's this invoice here that's on, as I mentioned before, through the hyperlinks. You can just drill down and see all the details within the system. So I've just given you a very quick flavor of what's possible. Just a very quick flavor of what's possible. And what I'd like you to do, if you think this might be interesting for your business, is to take a look for yourself. So in answer to the very last question, which is where to evaluate Suntico, well, that's very simple. You just go to our website, www.suntico.com, and on the home page, you're invited to try out our demo. And if you just fill in your name and email address there, you'll get sent the login details. And actually, you can access the very same demo system and demo account that I was looking at and sharing with you today. So in summary, what Suntico does provide is really what I would call a simple and nifty accounts payable process for your Sage 50. And it really tackles the problem. Or if we go back to the original question, should you have more or less accounts payable process? Well, of course, you should always follow good practice. But you should always look for ways in which you're not where the process is not introducing delays into the business. And I think for a company that is kind of sitting between a very small business where the delays are not going to be important, or a much larger business that would want to implement a much more rigorous and rigid AP processing system, I think Suntico fits fairly and squarely into the middle of that, into the mainstream of the small to medium-sized businesses, perhaps employing 10 to 100 people and using Sage 50.